Oh, this is Jesse with Open States, and this is a video just doing a quick overview of the repositories and code available as open source through the Open States project. I'm starting on the project overview part of the getting started part of the contributors guide in the Open States docs. So note that you can come back to here for a quick reference at docs.openstates.org and then choose getting started under contributing for a quick directory of some of the repositories. There are a few different repositories that we use to organize the project and our source code. So I'm just going to walk through some of those. I'm going to start with first our Open States organization, which you can find at github.com/openstates. Another good place to go just to find where all the stuff is. You can browse pinned repositories, the full history of repositories. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. I'm going to highlight some of the most important ones. And I'm going to start with some of the repositories we use just for management. So for instance, this is the issues repository. And we use this repository to manage incoming bug reports, feature requests, questions, and you can find a lot of those through the links here with some of our quick explanation of how to create a good issue. And you can click into issues to see different bug reports that are coming in. Some of these are automatically generated. You can see Bobsled, our task runner, is creating a bunch of them. Some of these are submitted by people. If you see a bug, this is the place to submit it. We also have discussions in this repository. This is a place where you can ask questions. We also have the Open States chat currently through Slack as an option to ask questions, but discussions is a good place to do it. So these are both found in the Open States issues repository. Another one we want to look at is documentation. So documentation is the repository containing the docs, which powers docs.openstates.org. So everything you see here under documentation is also available in its source code here in the documentation repository. So if you see an opportunity where you think the docs can be improved, that's a great way to start contributing. And the OpenStates documentation repository is the place to do that. Okay, so those are a couple of repositories we use to manage the project. I want to just take a stroll through some of our most active repositories where some of the most important project features are powered. I'm going to start with the people repository. This is openstates/people. This is a repository that contains data. So this is not so much code, it's really a data repository. And this is a repository that we use as the authoritative source for understanding people, which, when you see people, you can usually think legislator, state legislator, congressperson, but also importantly, we've also got people at the municipal level, some statewide elected officials in here as well. So this repository is both an opportunity to contribute and also a data source. So you'll notice as you look in through here in the data folder, we've got a folder for each jurisdiction for which we have people. I'm just going to go into the first one. These are by sort of abbreviation. So AK is Alaska. And notice that we've got a structure in here with the different types of people data committees, committees of people, executive, typically statewide elected officials, legislature, people representing specific legislative districts, municipalities, and retired. So retired is a special folder when we have a person who no longer has an active elected role. We move them into the retired folder. We want to keep a record of that historical data, but keep those other folders clean with just people who are currently elected. We're going through redistricting right now, and that means there's a lot of people moving around different districts. Big election year just happened, so we're moving people into retired there as well. Let's take a look at that executive folder and just one of these examples. You can see what these are YAML files. So again, people is a repository of data about elected officials that represented as these YAML files. So this is fairly user-friendly. We tried to pick a format that people who are a little less technical can at least read and look at and understand easily. and hopefully be able to contribute improvements as well. So there are some basic data points you can see here. We also have opportunities to provide things like Twitter handles. Not all of our contexts have all the data, so it's another good opportunity to make contributions is to add data into this people repository. Also note that this people repository data is the authoritative source. For the data from here goes into our OpenStates database. So that powers API resources on people as well. So if you are hitting the API and requesting people data, ultimately the source of that data is this people repository. Okay, that's the people repository. Let's take a look at openstates-scrapers. The scrapers repository is our most active repository. This is source code for web scrapers, and web scrapers generate by far the most data into the OpenStates project. You'll notice that we have a few different ways this is split up. At a top level, we've got kind of two generations of scraper technology. We have scrapers and scrapers next. The original scrapers date back, some of these date back quite a ways and use the underlying scrape lib. And scrapers next are using a newer scraper library called Spatula, which is a little bit more tailored to the way that we want to use scrapers to do a little bit more advanced things like really quickly assessing, like, is there new data in a state or not? And so that's the first thing you want to know about this repository, is that both of these folders could contain a web scraping code about the jurisdiction that you're interested in. So be sure to check both to make sure you understand what code is there. Let's take a look at scrapers real quick. Again, into Alaska, notice that we've got a bunch of different kinds of scrapers. Now, again, not every jurisdiction has every kind of scraper, but generally speaking, we can have scrapers about bills, votes on bills, people. So again, scrapers that we use to grab people data and inject it into that people repository you just saw, committees, and events. So for Alaska, in the original generation of scrapers, we have actions, bills, and events. Let's go up to scrapers next and see what Alaska has there. And you can see we have in the new spatula-based scraper code base, we have committees and people. And if we take a look in there, you can see this is all Python code. So all the web scraping code is in Python. You can see we're pulling in the spatula library here to grab some classes that help us out. And this is all the code that gets data, makes requests to the source website, in this case, aka-ledge.gov, and then processes the data that comes back from those requests, as a web scraper does. So that's a quick overview of OpenStates scrapers. Once again, we've got scrapers and scrapers next. So check both if you're looking for all the scrapers in a given jurisdiction. And the types that you can expect are scrapers for bills, votes, people, committees, and events. Okay, one more I want to show on this initial tour is openstates-core. And most new contributors shouldn't have to jump in here. This tends to be a little bit more of an advanced task to go in and make changes here. But this repository contains the core logic that helps with data transformations in the project primarily. Other stuff as well, but primarily data transformations. So scrapers are going to, one of those scrapers runs is going to emit a certain structure of data about a bill, a person, a committee, etc. And this library, openstates-core, is going to have the logic for kind of like running around that to initiate that scraper run, to get the data, validate it, and process it, and then transform it and inject it into the OpenStates database. So a lot of data models are in here. Let's take a look at the OpenStates folder, the data subfolder, and then models. And you can find some of the logic that defines models in the OpenStates database. Ultimately data has to come out of the scrapers, get transformed into these models and inserted into the database. So here, for instance, is the bill model and a bunch of related models, abstracts, titles, identifiers, actions, and a lot more. Okay, so you've seen a quick overview of some of the most important repositories in the OpenStates project. Once again, you can go to docs.openstates.org to find a quick reference back to these, or you can take a look at our GitHub organization, github.com/openstates.